You're listening to Toronto's #1 real estate podcast, powered by Watson Estates. The most successful local real estate investing starts right here, right now. Here's your host, broker, investor, and social media influencer, Bradley Watson.
Good morning, investors. Bradley here from Watson Estates. Happy Tuesday, May 19th, and I am so glad you could join us again for another real estate podcast and update on what's been going on in our marketplace. We are #1 on Google Podcasts for Toronto real estate. Thank you guys for tuning in, and leave us a comment, give us a thumbs up. We're going to continue to put out fantastic content, sharing some of the latest news that's come out in our marketplace here in Toronto. Today, we got some cool stuff to cover. We're going to start off talking about, is this a once-in-a-decade chance to get in Toronto's housing market? And this comes from an article that is entitled the same from the Toronto Star. This is probably the article of the day that we're going to see in and around the news. And so I want to share with you because they consult with experts, whether that's through real estate associations or economists, on what their outlook is for the real estate market here in Toronto after COVID-19. And it lines up quite similarly to what we talked about yesterday and days past. So I'm excited to dive into that and share some more insight. And then I want to talk about what's expected at the Quayside after Sidewalk Lab's departure. There's been way more articles than I would have expected now that Sidewalk Labs has walked. And so I want to talk about what's the plans here. Where are we in this, RFP, the request for proposals? Has there even been announcements made yet? And what are people kind of talking about what would happen on the east end of Toronto now that they're gone? And then we can't leave out the fact that today is the grand opening of Ontario. Stage 1 is today, ladies and gentlemen. That means it's the day you and Winnie the Poodle have been waiting for. Today's the day you can get your fur baby groomed. And there are people lining up, 2 meters apart, of course, to get their fur babies groomed. So let's jump right into our first story. Today we're going to talk about this article that came out of the Star. Home sales are down 69%. Is this a once-in-a-decade chance to get into Toronto's housing market? I'll be honest, when I started reading this article, my first thought was, Actually, what I do is I take these articles, I kind of crop them, I take a look at them, and I scan them. And when I first looked at them, I'm like, this doesn't seem like much, right? Like, really, this is all the news coming out today. But as you read this article and it gives different perspectives, it's almost like they went against the rule of writing newspapers and they put the best stuff near the tail end. So I want to skim through this and I want to give you all the highlights. So yesterday, you'll be reminded before we get into the text here that I shared kind of this feeling, and that's kind of what it was, of what's been going on in our marketplace. We're talking about an increase in showings and activities and what I'm hearing in the marketplace, not based on stats, just simply based on my business interactions and kind of what's been going on. So here what we have is more people pretty much expressing the same thing, but then also backed by economists as well. So here's the article. House-hungry millennials could be forgiven for hoping that the silver lining in COVID-19's economic rampage is an unexpected shot at the real estate market. Feeling priced out and discouraged by heated bidding wars and bully offers. So they're kind of talking about, and we've been discussing this for a long time. People have been getting priced out, especially early this year, in a feeling that we probably haven't felt since back in 2017. And so it's just starting to ramp up, right? It's kind of like, oh man, this is a bad analogy given that I've got a baby coming in the next month or so, but it's like birth pains. It's starting getting worse and worse and worse. Oh man, I hope my wife didn't hear that. She sometimes hears my podcast and that's going to circle right back on me, I can tell. But it was just starting to get worse, right? And so all of a sudden we've kind of pulled the plug on this thing. And now we're kind of left with, well, what does it look like today? So now in April, we saw home sales tumbling 69% year over year in April. So on a year-over-year basis, home prices have stalled. So even though we've seen a huge crushing blow to the number of sales, the average price is pretty much stable. It's been stalled. So it's down. It says it was down about $90,000 from February's average price. So still a drop, right? Still a purchasing opportunity for people who have been sitting on the sidelines and are in a position to take the risk of buying in this marketplace. While there are some opportunities in the COVID-19 housing market, experts warn those come with risks, and timing the low point is tricky for buyers. This is the same reason why I wouldn't try and time the low point. I would make sure if you see a buying opportunity, take that buying opportunity if you're in a position to do so. But here's a little highlight for you as well. It says here, even if this is a once in a decade chance to step on the property ladder, it may be slipping away as the economy sputters back to life. So this is kind of where the rest of this article branches from. They interview 6 experts. They got 2 economists, 3 real estate brokers, and a mortgage specialist. And I'm really excited to hear about what the mortgage specialist said. Again, this article just it just ramps up. It's just packed with good stuff. So they start off with Andrew Harold of condos.ca. So he said the bottom is not falling out of the market, but it's a better time for a first-time buyer probably than we've seen since 2009. I would agree. 2017 was also a pretty good buying opportunity, but it happened so quickly. So I would agree with this statement. The year opened with bidding wars galore and homes commonly selling for 10% over list price. That's what we were coming out of, but the market has since stabilized. This is another quote. He says, "You've even started to see offer dates creeping back in, which is certainly an indication people are feeling a bit more confident." I have not seen that as much. I think that's a bit of a jump, a little bit of an overstatement, but I do expect that to start happening very soon, if not already. Maybe he's noticed a couple in the last couple days. But the point here is people setting dates, and the whole the subtext under that is holding for multiple offers, right? Pricing for multiple offers. But what I do see is what he said next, which is you're not seeing massive discounts off the list price, but you are seeing 98% of list or 10 or 20,000 under asking. So this is those 2 points he just made actually contradict, right? Because if you're seeing them creeping back in, that means you're hinting at people are pricing them low in order to get multiples. But then he goes on to say that people are pricing them competitively to get these discounts and to get not necessarily huge discounts. People are looking for deals, but 98% of list is what they're selling for, which is more so what I'm seeing. I'm seeing people kind of pricing them properly and then taking a little bit of a haircut, just given the nature of what's going on, and because either there's risks associated with this, and so you're paying that premium. I guess as a seller, you're taking a bit of a cut. Anyways, listings were down 64% in April compared to the same month last year, with short supply putting upward pressure on prices and signs of pent-up demand. Okay, if you guys have not already, make sure you get your grandmas a neck brace because the whiplash is coming. I expect that this is just from my thinking is that you're kind of, and this was kind of alluded to in that point, is you see demand sparks first before supply. We're going to see the demand coming back, and that's going to be like, oh, okay, well, you know what? We took our house out of the market, but now I'm seeing the demand back, so now I'm going to come back. That little week or 2 weeks, I don't think it'll be a full month, but it'll happen very quickly. You are going to be in for some serious whiplash. There's a bit of confidence coming into the market, he said. Then they move on to Zoocasta CEO Lauren Haw. She warned that sales statistics are skewed by the low number of sales and the mix of available properties in the market. Of course, this makes sense. Quote, neighborhood by neighborhood, things are quite different. Also the case, and I would even say city by city is very different. And housing type by housing type is very different. There's mass differences in our marketplace. That's where some short-term rentals have migrated to the long-term rental and resale market, but there are few detached houses available in good school districts. So what she's saying here is that the school district homes, the low-rise, backyard, family-friendly neighborhoods are in short supply. But here's the thing, they were in short supply before. But she does make a good point. She talks about how April and May is the crown month for family homes in good school districts, and they're not for sale right now. So just to kind of give you guys a heads up on how, on a seasonal basis, our market works, and I tell this to my clients pretty much every listing. I explain this because people are often asking, when's the best time to list my home, or like in a normal marketplace? My answer is usually, it depends on the area, of course, but generally speaking, February and March across the GTA is a time for first-time home buyers to enter the market. So if you're looking to buy your first home, you want to get in early. So if in theory our market's been pushed back a couple months, I did a podcast/video that's going to be coming out this week talking about what happened in China. And just a little heads up on there, things have been rebounding quite quickly. And so if we follow what they're looking, we're only a month and a half, 2 months behind them. My expectation is these first-time home buyers, they're going to start the wave. And so in a normal market, February, March, you see those guys. By April and May, you have your move-up buying happening. You've got people moving from those, apartment buildings downtown into a low rise with maybe a semi or a detached home. And that happens in the April, May months, which is why May consistently and April, usually they used to say April, but I actually notice it's mostly in May now, tends to be the highest price month if you kind of look in the last 10, 20 years. So this is kind of what she's saying is like now we're at a point where it's the first time home buyers are looking, but the move up buyers, the homes available to the move up buyers aren't really there yet. Probably because those guys took the biggest haircut of them all and they've just pulled off onto the sidelines. The article talks about how there's 905 communities, Hamilton, Peterborough, Barrie, London, Kitchener, Waterloo, these outside markets as well. They seem to be doing well. And the reason for that is, of course, that people are becoming more open to the idea of distancing. They're not having to go to work. And so there's opportunities in there as well for the stability of those marketplaces. Royal LePage CEO Phil Soper says, there is a risk premium for trading in any financial crisis, and frankly, it's justified because there are so many unknowns. That benefit of a sale price, this is a good point actually, is 2 to 5% lower, looks more substantial when you consider prices have been expected to rise as much as 15% this spring. So he's saying, okay, well, you got a deal, they're coming 98% of asking. It's maybe not that amazing a deal, but when you compare it against where we were going to be headed this spring of a 15% increase, it's starting to look a little bit better. Right? Because we saw such a vast, so maybe year over year, we're not up or down all that much. It's kind of boring. But compared to where we were in February, well, now we're talking a huge price advantage here to buying. He also warned that the window for those savings will close as the market returns to normal. And there are signs that is already happening. Later in this podcast, we're going to talk about the reopening of Ontario. If that's not reopening, I don't know what is. The longer you wait, the less an opportunity will be for a cheaper purchase. These are a lot of good quotes here from him. In any market correction, buyers are the earliest to react to a potential downturn and adjust their expectations lower as price goes. Sellers are in last and the first out. So this is a good point too, right? Like the buyers, they are a little more fluid, right? Like in order to purchase a property, what do you got to do, right? Like you've been pre-approved, your pre-approval works for 3 months. You're kind of flexible that way. A lot of people don't even get pre-approvals. It depends on the financial stability of the client. So they're kind of fluid, right? Like they come in, they'll take a look. Oh, no deal. Okay, I'll see you in a month. Okay, and they'll kind of jump in and out. Whereas to sell a property, there's a lot more legwork. You got to prepare it. It's a little slower. And so sellers, they're not looking unless they want to just dump their property, which some people have. I don't know how many more deals there are out like that now, but some people have. And so they'll kind of pull it back and say, you know what, if I'm going to put all this effort into showing my home, I got people with these masks and gloves that I don't know what they touched coming through my property, it's got to be worth it. And so the reaction time is a lot slower on that side. And this naturally will mean a bit of a delay in price fluctuations, right? Okay, so David McDonald is our first economist with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. He doubts few young adults, 25 to 35, are thinking about buying homes, with about 30% having lost their jobs or the majority of their work hours since February. You know what? I work with a lot of young people, a lot of millennials, and I don't see this, but he's an economist, so I am not going to argue. My thinking is even if there is a huge chunk that are holding off because of fear of losing their job or, not having the stability, which we actually see that's not necessarily the case by another economist in a minute. I think it actually might have been the mortgage broker. We'll get there though. The thing here is I don't see that I think the demand is so high that even if you were to have a let's say 30% lost their jobs, let's say 30% are sidelining, I don't think that you're going to even feel that because there's so much demand pent up on the other 70%. But here's an important quote that I got from the mortgage broker, which I think is my favorite part of this whole article because it's an interesting look from the mortgage industry. One sign the housing market could be quickly revived is that mortgage pre-approvals are beginning to pile up, said James Laird, president of CanWise Financial. It feels like just before the spring market right now, where there is a few purchases happening, but not many, but it does feel like people are readying themselves to possibly buy in the next couple of months. So remember we talked about this fluid, the buyers coming in, they get their pre-approval and kind of sit on them for 3 months, and you can extend them for 6 months. It's very easy to do. A lot of people get freaked out. Oh, I don't want to run my credit. I mean, as long as you're purchasing a property, you're not doing it too many times, you're good. So people are coming in and they're getting the pre-approval. So they're likening this to pre-spring. So maybe our typical February, March is coming in the next month or so, because that's kind of what it sounds like based on what they're saying. Very interesting perspective. So there you go. Yesterday you got the real estate perspective. Today you're getting the mortgage pre-approval perspective. Interesting stuff. While part-time and hourly workers have suffered disproportionate job losses. So this is a good point too. He's pretty much saying that it seems that only 10% of full-time workers have lost their job. It's the part-timers that got spanked, right? But who's a part-timer or an hourly person that's looking to enter the real estate market? Like the prominent buyer are people with full-time, long-term stable jobs. And like, we don't really want people that don't have that stability going in the market anyways. So then I love that. I mean, let's just talk about how awesome that guy's contribution was to this article. You just saved the article, man. Way to go. Maybe get your mortgage from CanWise Financial and we'll pay them our respects. Okay. But then there's one more economist here. Conference Board of Canada senior economist Robin Wiebe said there are competing factors that could hasten or slow recovery. But on balance, he said, Toronto housing fundamentals can likely sustain a comeback. So here's an article. One of the things that might go against a quick rebound in the housing market, this is probably why they put him last because he's the opposite side, is that consumers in general are carrying high debts. And we've heard this argument time and time again, and I think it's valid, right? Even though rates are low, they may not be prepared to jump into the housing market. That's not just young people. That's because of all ages. So that has to do with all ages. And the other thing I would add to that, and he kind of talks about it a little bit here, is this idea of immigration, right? Immigration is down, but does this mean no demand? Between these two things, does this mean no demand? And I don't think so. The article reads, Toronto has pent-up demand based on Conference Board estimates that the city added 128,000 people last year on top of the 125,000 in 2018. So even if we're not getting people now, we have this huge pent-up demand from the last 2 years. That's equivalent to 2 census metropolitan areas, according to StatsCan. By definition of 100 people is what they define as that. So we have enough for 2 full metropolitan area cities that have come into our country in the last 2 years through immigration. Until the shutdown, Toronto has enjoyed, quote, red hot employment growth, rising over 4%. So we've seen interest rates coming down. We've seen just a lot of factors that are pushing demand. And that has contributed to pent-up demand and short supply because CMHC statistics show there are 209 completed and unoccupied owner and non-rental apartments in Toronto. The 20-year average is 630, which is floating around 3 times that amount. So, guys, these are the reasons we were seeing such massive price acceleration in the spring. And to think that we're now all of a sudden, because of coronavirus and lockdown, and we're seeing a bit of a leveling off already and all these, everything, to sit back in a chair and to say the odds are better that the market is going to come tumbling down if things are starting to reopen now. I think that's a weaker argument, at least from my account, from what I'm reading in the articles. And I mean, you guys know, you guys are hearing the news I'm hearing. We're reporting it every day, sharing with you guys. I think the case can be made stronger that it's upwards from here. Even some of the worst case, we've seen huge fluctuations, by the way, in speculation of where prices will go. But even in the worst case scenarios, they're not talking about prices continuing to come down and down and down. They're talking about a slow recovery. And so where's the bottom? And I think the stats show the bottom's behind us, but this week, hopefully we'll see some more in the side of stats as well. A lot of unknowns about the road to recovery. So, but they made a good point here. That was something that they've all kind of agreed on. There's so many unknowns. And what happens if there is a second wave of COVID-19 infection in the fall? I've heard some just kind of people out there talking about how weather seems to be impacting COVID-19. And hopefully as the weather picks up, it'll subside a little bit, but who knows, right? And our friend Soper, I think this was the Royal LePage guy, said a brief second wave I believe the market could manage and people will treat it like aftershock of an earthquake. An extended or more damaging second wave would mean all bets are off for the economy and the housing market. And I've said the same thing. Like that second wave going crazy, and not the second wave itself, but the closures, our economy taking another massive hit. The uncertainty of that, I think, is going to freak a lot of people out and could mean devastation in our real estate market. Whew. All right. So I want to talk about, we're gonna kind of digress a little bit here. And I want to talk about Google City. And this wasn't a video or a podcast rather that I was planning on doing. About a week and a half ago when the news came out, when the news broke that Sidewalk Labs was pretty much done. It is done. And Google City, as I like to call it, is over. We were talking about like what that kind of meant, and it was a very general little update, right? But Since then, I've seen more news articles. I don't know if they're like, are you guys having trouble finding news? Because I know I'm not, but apparently there's this ongoing discussion on now what, right? Like the next day, all of a sudden everyone's like, well, what do we do with this area now? Right? And I've seen so many articles. Like here's one from Forbes, 9 things we lost when Google canceled its smart cities project in Toronto. Or here's another one here, how smart city planning could slow future pandemics. So like there's a lot of talk about what comes next. And so I thought, you know what, I got to share what the news is sharing. And I want to have this conversation with you guys. And kind of, I pulled what I think is the best article out of the batch to share with you. It comes from The Star. And it talks about like what I like about this is it's actionable. It's not like, oh, we're like, it's almost like there's a pity party, right? Everyone's sitting and saying, oh, we lost something amazing. And on the other side, you've got, it's actually really funny to hear some of the people that have been really hard on Sidewalk Labs praising the decision and saying, this is an amazing thing for democracy. You know, there's like polar opposites here. But what I like about this article is it gives action items on where do we stand, what comes next, are we screwed, are we not screwed? Here we go. On-demand bus routes, sensors to measure traffic speed, weather, and air quality. Homegrown innovations like these remain viable options for development at Quayside. Quayside. I love how I said Quayside. Let's start calling it Quayside from now on. Oh, man. Even with Sidewalk Labs out of the picture and the COVID-19 pandemic a threat, say Canadian tech experts and entrepreneurs. This comes from Alex Ryan, Vice President of Solutions Lab at the Mars Discovery District. And they said, driving the innovation economy for Canada, we think it's going to be an essential part of the rebuild and restart our economy. So obviously he's pro-innovation that way. We think there's still a great opportunity for Canada to lead at Quayside. So we haven't lost the space, guys. Like we still have that land. That's the first thing. Okay. So just relax, you know, and for any of you who are over the top excited because there's been the innovation is now gone there and you don't like the invasion of privacy, let's also relax because you don't know what's coming. The next step's at Quayside. Okay. I'm going to stop that now. It's getting old. Come on, Brad. Getting old. At Quayside are uncertain for Waterfront Toronto. So here's the action items, guys. Waterfront Toronto declined to provide a timeline to the Star for when or if a new request for proposal would be tendered for Quayside. Building a next-generation community is a key deliverable for Waterfront Toronto, said a spokesperson. While our long-term goal remains the same, we will take the time necessary to determine what our next steps will be to bring this valuable asset to market. So this is why I've been so shocked that there's been any news about this at all. And this is why I was kind of hesitant to bring it up as a topic is there's no news, guys. Like there's nothing going on other than the fact that like right now they're in this article, it kind of talks about how they're in discussions, you know, and like there's something called a PDA, a planned development agreement, which different than the PDA that some of you use out there. Keep your lips to yourselves, people. Between Waterfront Toronto and Sidewalk Labs, written before the latter development, its master plan for Quayside spelled out which rights and licenses belong to whom if the project didn't go forward. So we know there's a lot of kind of trademark stuff, or I don't even know if that's the legal word for it. Like there's not even patents, whatever that is. Like there's rights to certain intellectual property. That's what it says here. That exists now, and who owns it? Is it Waterfront Toronto or Sidewalk Labs, like in Google, right? Like who gets that? And the more of it we can keep, the more we can reuse in the next, setup, assuming we do that again. Where it's being praised, there's a quote here. I believe this is from our friend at BlackBerry. Yeah, this guy is like, if he is the co-chief executive at BlackBerry, who has a BlackBerry anymore. But his claim to fame shouldn't even be BlackBerry. At this point, it should be just knocking down Waterfront Toronto and Sidewalk Labs. So he said, when you can't hijack the data governance and you can't hijack the intellectual property, what's left for an IP and data company? So he thinks, you know what? Because we made it too difficult on not giving the information, in other words, Waterfront Toronto has protected the citizens. And because we're not giving their information as openly and giving all the intellectual property over to Google, therefore Google pulled out. That's his explanation for it. But who knows? And Forbes, actually, this was also cool. They talk about how, and this has maybe been missed, we are not the first ones to implement a smart city here. And Google's not the only one that can do it. IBM launched smart city projects with global cities like Madrid, and Intel works with San Jose. China actually is home to about half of the global smart city projects. So there is And it's offering a huge amount of data for city planners. So it's a big thing, and it's happening globally. So let's not think, oh, we would have been screwed in Toronto. It would just be like the next step into the phase of the Antichrist and chips in all of our brains here. Like, this is going on around the world, okay? And so ultimately no different than the end of the last podcast. It is to be determined. We're still feeling the sting of Google leaving. I think that's where it is. I think emotions are riding hot. And so we just need to chill. We just need to relax. Let's get a vaccine. Let's get our economy reopened. And then we can talk about what's going on in the, like, really, is that what we want to be talking about right now? This is what we want to be talking about. Topic number 3, reopening of customers to Toronto retail stores. So I want to talk about here, there's an article that came out, and I don't have it in front of me. There it is. CBC.ca. Thank you, CBC. And they are talking about retail stores and how they're experiencing the reopening, which is set for today, Tuesday. Province stores with separate street entrances, physical distancing measures can reopen on Tuesday. Some retail store owners in Toronto are reluctant to open their shops to customers on Tuesday, even though businesses can resume if the stores have separate street entrances and physical distancing measures in place. I mean, what's interesting about this is anytime you've got like these kind of testimonial type articles, it makes you wonder, like, what percentage of people is this? So this guy here, he works at Short Stack Records, Cal McLean on Dundas Street West near Bathurst Street. And they have a record store, right? So he says reopening right now could put his staff and customers at risk. And he says no one has a clear idea of what we are supposed to be doing. There seems to be a lot of confusion. And so it talks about how it was announced on Thursday they can reopen. And so he says retail services that are not in shopping malls and have separate, this is the government, sorry, street front entrances. We already talked about that. Let's move on. So you can book appointments and stuff like. This is pretty much what they've said, but then there's a confusion by these businesses. So this is the business owner, actually. 3 business days isn't long enough for you to acquire those supplies, especially when the demand is so high. Reopening Tuesday, that's not enough time to get everything in order to open safely. He talks about how he's got to get, what are some of the things he's got here? Where is it? Oh, you sometimes lose something. Okay, anyways, he's talking about face masks, what do they call them? PPDs, PPLs, protective devices, PPDs, and these face shields. So this guy's like going hardcore, right? And he's concerned. Oh, here they are: face masks, hand sanitizer, spit guards, right? Like, these are the things that he says he needs. And I mean, it's true. Like, if you needed all those things between Thursday and today, good luck. Like, there's so much competition acquiring those supplies that it'd be very difficult. But I mean, do you really need all those things? I guess that's your call, man. That's your business if you don't want to open. So. But this is what he's saying here. He said, what is most needed, he added, is a freeze on commercial rents. I was like, oh, okay. I get it. Okay. In other words, you just want a legal reason to not have to pay rent. Like, tuck that in the back end. Meanwhile, we have other businesses that are trying to open, and they need to open. At Diggity Dog Grooming in Cabbagetown, we have they're booked up until the middle of June. And she says a lot of people are desperate to get their dogs groomed at this point. Guys, puppies need haircuts too. She said she'll be wearing a face mask at all times, staggering appointments, starting later, grooming fewer dogs a day. She's going to be going outside to pick up the dog. So she's making it work, right? So what's the difference between these two businesses? One's giving a record and one is cutting a dog. Like, oh, don't cut the dog, cut the hair. Ooh, sorry. People are so into their dogs as babies. Like, fur babies is such a thing. I find it so funny. I had a dog growing up. Like, I love dogs. I'm a dog kind of guy. I don't have a dog here because they're dogs. Like, this is my view. But I mean, some people are just so into their dogs. Now, if you're in a tight little space and you don't want kids, I get it. You're replacing the kid with the dog, but it's not the same. It's not the same. They don't keep you up at night screaming. It's not the same. And she said it's important for the health of the animal. So one of the things her points is that they can actually develop health issues. So her thinking is that dog grooming should actually have been an essential service. And I mean, of course, she wants her business to be essential, as do a lot of people. So there's actually, to add some to stability to what the first guy said, John Tory actually agreed with him. And he said that the province must provide clear criteria for restarting the economy. This did happen very quickly. And so he says absolutely imperative the public is given clearly understood criteria, which I don't think has happened yet either. Tory said that while he believes the city is ready for this major milestone, the public needs to have a clear understanding of exactly how the province is making decisions to move forward with reopening. It's very difficult, right? Because we're trying to keep this thing opening slowly. We don't want it to go off the rails. And so, I get this kind of conflict that the province is facing. I think what will open tomorrow will be manageable. Then we can see how the numbers go. And is the thing that is really important, the thing that's really important to see is what happens when we have this modest reopening, and keep a very close eye on that before we decide to rush into further reopenings. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're going to just walk past that quote. That's like a run-on sentence, man. Okay, but the essence of it is we're going to open, we're going to see what happens, we're going to reassess, and then if we can, we're going to keep opening. If not, we're going to pull it back. Got it. Thank you, Mr. Tory. So these are some things going on in our Toronto real estate market this week. I'm super excited. I'm just so hopeful. I can't promise it, but last month it happened, and I'm hoping this month we get a mid-market update, a mid-month update. And if we do, I'm sure to share it with you as soon as it comes out. If we get like we did last time, where they do kind of early in the morning, we could actually beat the news outlets in publishing that for you. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a wonderful Tuesday, and it's a 4-day work week. So keep your heads up. We can get through this, and I'll see you tomorrow with more. Take care and keep it real.